Welcome to Mysteries of Superstition Mountain. I'm Larry Hedrick, where we bring the past into the present for our future viewers. Today we have another great story by Hank Sheffer.
Over the years, I've been really fortunate since I got out here to Apache Junction. I came here early one time to visit, as I'd mentioned one time in one of our stories. And then I came back in the 80s, and I met some really neat people. One particular fellow's name was Papa Jim Fire Eagle, and he was an Indian from Missouri who would come over and visit Apache land, and that's where I met him. And he came over with his wife, Snowflower, and his son and daughter-in-law, Joe and Patty Mooney. And they would set up a teepee at Apache land, and that's where they would stay for a week or so. Well, I got to meet Jim Fire Eagle. And at that time, he was a gentleman, 77 years old or so, long white hair, well, white-gray hair. A very interesting man. And he had talked about tribal things and things that Joe Mooney had done as a young man. And I told him, half puffy-chested and all, and I said, well, my second wife, her name was Whipple. And that was Whipple, as in Lieutenant Whipple, Fort Whipple, Arizona. And I said that back when all the Indians and the white men were fighting, you know. And he looked at me and he kind of laughed and he says, well, you know, it just goes to show you that all them Indians wasn't fighting, was they? Well, that's the way Jim Fire Eagle was. And I knew right then that we were going to be hard, fast buddies. One of the things he wanted to do was he wanted to take some walks into the mountain. Well, the first one that we went for was down in toward Garden Valley off the Second Water Trail. And what was really neat that Jim could do was he could point out things where Indians had set up camps. And he would say, well, right over there, you can see where they were making arrowheads, or they were making this or making that. And I asked him how he could tell, and he says, well, they're dammit piles. Dammit piles. Well, what else would they be? Well, he explained to me that it was just like any of us. If you're doing a craft or something like that, and you're working on it, and you break it, and something, you go, damn it, and you throw it down. Well, they did the same thing. They might be making a pot, or they might have been making an arrow, and they'd break it. I said, damn it, throw it on the ground. Well, you could find these things, and if you knew what to look for, you could go and find arrowheads, you could find pottery shards, and just all sorts of things. Well, we walked around from that, and he showed us all sorts of nifty things of how they'd set up camps. And finally, we meandered on back to camp, back into Apache land. And, of course, Jim drank coffee. When Jim drank coffee, y'all drank coffee. And you could float a spoon in his coffee, but it was pretty stout. But at any rate, the next trip was to be up into Hieroglyphic Canyon, but that wouldn't be until Saturday, a few days later. Well, come that Saturday, we walked up there, and he was actually showing us what some of these symbols meant. He explained that this whole rock was like a newspaper, and that's why they called them newspaper rocks, where you would see one Indian would say, this is where water was, and the next Indian would say, thank you, or something like that, however they did that stuff. But all these symbols meant something to the Indians. They didn't all point to Jacob Waltz's gold. Sorry, didn't work that way. Now, during this whole transition of things, I had taken my daughter and my son out to meet Joe Mooney and Patty and Jim Fire Eagle and his wife. And my Heather, who was probably 9 or 10 at the time, wound up with a crush on Joe Mooney. Well, I didn't hardly know what to do with that, but Joe was a whole lot cooler about it than I was. And he told Heather, he said, now, when I'm gone, all you have to do is look to the mountain, and I'll be there. Well, that worked for me, and it seemed to work for Heather, too. Well, come the following day was Sunday, and Papa Fire Eagle and his family left. They went back to Missouri. Well, now, come Monday morning, Heather held me to it. She said, I want to go up on the mountain. Well, I don't hardly know what to do with this, because this is a little girl about yay big. She's never been on the mountain. She knows nothing about the rocks or the snakes or the critters or anything else that's up there. But my son Jacob and I said, okay, we would take her up on the mountain. And the place we went to was down toward Garden Valley, where we had been the first trip with Jim. And one of the stories that Jim had told us about was about metates and the manos, and how the Indian women usually had a couple of metates. There was one big one that they used when they were in camp. And then there was a little one that they carried with them. But the big one, they would turn upside down and they would leave where they had camped, so that when they came back, that metate would still be there. Well, that's really a wonderful story, and I never gave it too much thought. But in the meantime, now my son and I are walking this little bitty girl up there who wants to go to the mountain and see Jim Mooney. So we're walking and walking, and she managed to keep up with them little bitty legs of hers. It means she walked about twice as far as we did. But we got up there into that place, and she said, this is where we have to be. So, okay. So there we sat. And it wasn't but a minute later that she and Jake went over, and she turned over a metate about this big. And it sure enough was, if you've ever seen one, you can't mistake what it is, and that was it. Well, the theory goes that if you were to find one, what you do is you leave it where you found it. There are so many people that you find out here, they don't do that. You'll find their driveways lined with metates and just all sorts of crazy things. But at any rate, Heather was quite content. She had found hers, and now it was time to go home. And that's what we did. We hiked back out, hardly said a word. She just giggled a lot, but we got back to the house. Heather was quite content, and I was a happy guy too, because as a daddy, I got to take both my kids and experience something not many people will ever get to do. And it's really kind of a shame that that's the way it is, but it is a mystery of the Superstition Mountains. Thank you for watching this episode of Mysteries of the Superstition Mountains.